There are so many reasons why someone starts a consulting practice. In this episode, I want to talk about the different ways that people make the transition, and there are three in particular that I want to point at so that we can look at the pitfalls and opportunities of each. Hello and welcome to your Consulting Business Podcast. My name is Russell Pearson. This is episode number 42. Today I want to look at the transition piece, moving from a space that you may perceive as a safe space into the world of consulting business where there is unknown. Okay, so when I say a safe space, there's usually a space that you start from, which is kind of your known world, whether you're an employee working for a corporate organization or whether you're running a service business of your own and you want to move into the advisory space, more of a consulting business. It's a transition there. There are still three different ways that people tend to transition to that new business model. And I want to touch on these because it really becomes the gap. And there's this concept of watch the step, mind your step as you step across the gap, because there are so many things that can go wrong. And it's a massive opportunity for you stepping into that space. But I want to make sure that you're armed with an understanding, a clear understanding, so you're not going in with unnecessary confidence, you're going in with a tempered type of confidence so that you can make good, smart steps to making sure that your consulting business thrives. All right, so let's talk about a number of different models. First, my model, the one that I actually stepped through, was I was working for someone else. And you may have been working for someone else or are currently working for someone else. And I was very good at what I did, and you're probably very good at what you do. That's the reason why you want to step into the consulting space, because you are ideally an expert. Now, I'm working within this organization and I had management. Now, the top management, fantastic. They valued what I brought to the organization, but the middle management, not so much. And I found the restriction of middle management so that I didn't get too much, didn't get out of my box, so to speak, so I could be managed, was the thing that was stopping me from actually becoming better at my job, from creating better outcomes for the organization I was a part of, and it was just very restrictive. That's the reason I decided to get out of where I was currently. And a large part of why I did it was actually, it was right at that time when podcasts became more popular. In other words, they actually became a thing because they were not a thing before. And all the older, we're talking about from the 70s, 80s, and 90s motivational speakers took the opportunity and said, I'm going to start a podcast of my own. And one of those people was Brian Tracy. I remember Brian Tracy very, very clearly talking about having being the CEO of your own life. Now, whether that be in the life or in your career, that it was you that actually had the responsibility, opportunities, and ownership to make your own decisions. Funnily enough, years later, I ended up finding myself at a bar drinking tequila with Brian Tracy, but that's another story. So he said those things, and that instilled in me the confidence to take a step out of the business. And what was interesting is that at that time, I had started to work on my own. So this is the first model, which is I'm currently employed, but I'm looking at doing work on the side. So it's kind of the side hustle concept, which means that really you're working around about 40 hours a week in your normal role, and then you're adding probably another 8, 16, 24 hours on top of that to start this new business. Now, I find that to be a really good way of stepping into the transition, because it allows you to stay one foot in the safety net, at the same time as start to experience that you may need to put in a little extra work. So as you start the business, maybe it is 60 hours, maybe it is 65 hours, gets you into a space where you're actively doing something that you want to be doing rather than doing something because it's a paycheck. Interesting. I'm reading a book at the moment, and I'm going to recommend it later in the session, so we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's Stephen King's On Writing, and there's a reason why I'm going to recommend it later. But I'm reading it at the moment, and he made a point of his son wanting to emulate this fantastic saxophone player that used to play with Bruce Springsteen. And they thought it was great because they loved music. They're all musicians themselves. And so they bought him this saxophone. After 6 months, Stephen King decided to go to his son and say, look, do you really want to keep doing this? Because one of the things he noticed was that yes, he was practicing, and yes, he could do scales and be capable with the saxophone, but he wasn't practicing outside of practice time. He wasn't doing it for the joy of it. He wasn't doing it for the love of it. He wasn't doing it sort of in his own time. And I think that there's something in that for each of you as consultants, that if you're not already doing this consulting piece in your own time outside of the work that you're doing for a paycheck, then it's a good it's a good question mark as to, is this something that you really want to be doing? Is this a joyful experience, or are you building the consulting business just to get out of the daily grind of the organization? If you are, it may be worth questioning, because you could find yourself doing much harder work and having far more responsibility inside your own practice. Because the reality is, when you start your own practice, it is a business of one. There is you. And if you've got partners, it becomes a challenge. So the business of one is actually quite effective, but it means you're wearing multiple hats when you're starting the business, which means there's more things to do. You are the finance manager, the sales manager, the marketing manager, the production manager. There's so many different elements of what you do that you need to understand at least the generalizations of each of those roles, right? That's before you start bringing other people on to help you. So if you're in a role, you can use that as a safety net and then work outside of hours. So that's certainly one way to do it. Another way I've seen people do it is to step back from their employment role and become a contractor. Now, in actual fact, that's probably more risky than even stepping out full time, which is the third option I'll tell you about in a minute. Because when you move back into a contractor role, it may feel like you're running your own business, but the reality is you're not feeding yourself. The organization is still feeding you your work, and in fact, you're still employed without the benefits, right? So you may be able to command some higher fees, certainly in that contract role, but you won't be getting the safety net that an employee gets within their role. And so just be cautious of stepping into that contractor role as a way to step out. Unless you have major plan, unless you've got a plan that you're going to have more than one client, not just the client you were employed by in the first place. So that's certainly another role. I see people doing that. I think it can be dangerous, because you're putting all your eggs in one basket, and there's no reason for them to keep you around after a project. All right, where in an employment opportunity, they kind of do. They got to keep you around for the next project. So the third option is to step fully into your consulting business. You leave one thing and you start another. Now, I don't see a lot of people doing that unless they have been made redundant or have had a payout of some sort, which gives them a safety net of cash. Now, there is an element of caution that I want to put out there. You don't know how long it's going to take to actually get this consultancy started. Is it going to take 3 months, 6 months, 18 months? We don't know, but you've got a roadmap of dollars to actually run to. So make sure that if you are doing that where you've got a lump sum of cash, you're going to use that as your escape clause from the daily grind. You're going to start your own consultancy. That you're budgeting out the amount of time so you know what your runway is. And I would suggest if you do that, it is definitely worth getting support. And support from a mentor who has done it before, because your timeline and how quickly you need to move is something you need to be very aware of if you're not already, if you don't have a second option. So like as far as you've got one foot in the employed camp and you're actually working outside of hours. You may find, because this is what happens with the employment situation, is you get used to running as an employee, which means that you have different support elements, yeah? And then when you leave that organization, those supports are gone. So your planning that you would have done as potentially a manager or an expert inside the organization will have to be very different when you're running your own thing. So I just want to make it very clear that if you are going to take the safety net option, that you use some of that cash to get mentoring or guidance or planning from somebody who has done it before, so that you can make sure that you have a realistic timeline and that you know what milestones you need to hit so that you can be earning the money that you need to earn to continue to have the lifestyle that you have. So there is nothing better, in my experience, than a consulting business model. There is nothing better than being an advisor who is helping other people. It is really the pebble that is dropped in the pond and sends ripples out, which is a fantastic way to be fulfilled in the work that you do. The other amazing thing is I just got back from a trip from Bali for the last 10 days and was able to work remotely from there, just an hour a day, just keeping the pace up. I didn't go on a holiday and have to come back and do catch up. I was able to work remotely, and most people didn't even realize that I was gone, other than coming back and realizing I'm all red in the face. I don't tend to tan. I tend to actually go orange, like a bit of an Oompa Loompa. So the question for you is, how are you going to take that step? Yeah. So the way I did it was to have an employee role and then work on top. Some people will move to a part-time role and then work part-time, but I think it's probably really good from a work ethic point of view to start getting used to working additional hours just in case you need to get that momentum rolling when you are building your startup business. Now, there's all sorts of things. If you are in the startup phase, make sure you watch and listen to these podcasts, because they have all sorts of different topics and different strategies and tactics to help you really accelerate what you want to do in the very near future, and to make sure you get your best start. Now, the thing I want to talk about today is this book right here, and hopefully Alfred's put it up for me. This book is On Writing by Stephen King. Now, it's a fantastic book. Why am I bringing it up? Why am I talking about writing if you're going to be starting a consulting business? Well, one part of the consulting business model is there's two elements to it. One is thought leadership. So what do I want to put out into the world as far as my own positioning, my branding, so that people see me as an authority? Now, that's not as big a deal if you are already an authority, but I think it's important, even if you are an expert at what you do, to continue to do work, to continue to do development in your expertise. And so writing, whether that be educational white papers and things like that, or whether that's marketing copy, which again is very much storytelling in itself, is a great exercise for you to become good at. Your ability to help people take next steps just makes you a better consultant and a better advisor. So Stephen King's perspective is fascinating. I think it's always great. I've always liked his writing style, but On Writing is, I think, a masterpiece that he's put out, which is him distilling his concepts on what makes good writing. And also he tells some of his story along the way, and I think it's a very enjoyable read and will help you in your storytelling in your professional practice. Until next time, if you've got questions, please do put them into the comments. I would love to engage with you. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what you would like to know about next in the world of consulting. If you leave comments, it's actually going to shape the future of the different sessions that we're putting together for you. The other thing you can do is you can go to russellpearsonprograms.com. If you go there, you're going to find a fantastic resource about how to get clients faster, and you can download that resource absolutely free. I invite you to go over and do that. If you're listening to the podcast, I'd love you to go and put a comment on there. Referrals and references and reviews, which is the word I was going for, are also always fantastic. And so if you are listening to the podcast and enjoying it, put a review there. I would love to hear from you and hear what it is that you're getting out of these different sessions that I'm putting out. The other thing too is, if you're looking at this on YouTube, subscribe. Leave comments. I'd love to hear more about what's going on in your world and your consulting business. Until next time, my name's Russell Pearson. Stay passionate, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye for now.